This is a hidden Holocaust here. We don't ever talk about it in this country. There's never been a Dancing with the Wolves, there's never been a Schindler's List. You know, we have a lot to do in our history to put that on the table. In a way, awakening a historical story from the early 19th century like Secret River is really what's great about storytelling and art as a medicine, because it finds us a new way to cleanse through and heal that generation of guilt. In the book of Secret River, Kate Grenville doesn't go into the minds of the Aboriginal people. Didn't even know who the Aboriginal people were until we started to do the adaptation. And then we were able to know that they were called the Darug people. Richard Green is a Darug elder who I had known who'd worked on previous Darug stories. And so he was a great contribution, especially for Andrew Bovell and Neil and I. And we all went up to a trip to spend about a long weekend at the Hawkesbury. And so we just sat around talking about what is the adaptation, how closer do we get with this medium of theatre, taking it from the book, bringing those words, playing with the physicality, playing with the form of drama theatre. The one thing that was really important that came out of it, pretty much all of us coming together, was that the water that surrounds and celebrates the reflection of the land around the Hawkesbury is called Durrumbin. So we wanted to have that spirit played out as a third-person narrator of the whole story, paying respect to both the arrival of non-Indigenous, but also celebrating the spirit and integrity of the First Nations people. And so Durrumbin was birthed.
There are two families in the Secret River. There's the Thornhill settler family, and then there's the Darug Aboriginal family. And they both occupy the space equally. For us, that was a really important decision, that they both were kind of visible to the same degree within the space, and there was a sense of balance. And it became very clear through talking about the way in which one scene would flow into the next, that if there was a shared campfire, both families used equally, that it would not only help to focus the drama in a very particular way, but it would also help to communicate the ideas of the production, which all really centre around the fact that these two families are both occupying the same space at the same time, and how would they solve that difficulty.
I guess by the time we start rehearsals, I've got a full suite of costume designs, but given that we're dealing with this kind of complex and highly sensitive material, I also felt a great responsibility to make sure that all of the actors understood that they could be involved in the process of having their character realised. And in terms of Aboriginal characters, what's culturally appropriate for one actor from one part of Australia may or may not be appropriate for another actor from another part of Australia. So I made sure that everybody understood that, we would negotiate, that I would spend time with them, that we would explore our options, that we could test things out. That's something that I kind of like to do anyway with actors, but in this context it became a really important part of how the process was going to roll out. I kind of decided that a way of unifying the whole theatrical world, which contains this one visual contrast, which is very extreme, was to kind of use a painterly effect, and that sort of forms this kind of visceral layer between the actor and the audience, and it has a relationship to landscape. But it also has a relationship to kind of the juiciness of humanity and the dirt and mud of poverty and the slime and grime of the river, as well as things that are more sort of pure and beautiful. So I decided that I would really explore this, because a t-shirt and jeans is essentially just a t-shirt and jeans. But if you want to turn the t-shirt into sunburn, or if you want to turn the jeans into skin, or if you want to turn the skirt into soup and stuff from the fire, then it requires another type of treatment. So that was the way that I chose to do it. I thought that the texture would be really something that would kind of link the humanity with the landscape and link all of the human beings with each other in the world.
When Tess and I started, there was no actual script for us to be interpreting and working with. So we were all at that stage going back to Kate Grenville's book and finding inspiration in her beautiful text. I was really inspired by a description that she gives to Thornhill when he first finds the river. He described it to himself as being like a church. This massive sense of grand, epic scale. I took my lead from that and really conceived the space as a spiritual kind of space, full of light. But one particular idea that struck me very powerfully was when the White family arrive on the river, that they arrive as foreigners in that space, and they kind of mess it up. I talked to Neil about the way in which the Thornhills could literally leave dirty footprints on the floor as they made their first steps into the world of the river.
Well, we had a very early creative development with heads of department and Neil and Stephen Page and Andrew Bovell as the script was being developed. And during that time, we kind of all decided that it was going to be inappropriate to kind of set such an important work with so many contemporary themes in it, even though it's historic in a historic context. And the idea of rolling out on old Sydney town just felt very antiquated. And so the challenge was always sort of laid out there. We all agreed that that was a good thing to do, was to try and stretch the visual language beyond the historic context. I guess the way I kind of arrived at this time-bending aesthetic was to explore characters within a historic context and to explore the same characters within a contemporary context. I started doing paintings, and then I chopped all the paintings up and turned them into collages, and then I photocopied the collages and chopped them up and turned them into other things. So it was a very sort of tactile process for me, arriving at a kind of point of fusion. It didn't just happen automatically, it happened through a kind of rigorous practical and instinctive process, creative process.
The play ends with a massacre, so we knew that people would be killed. And Neil and I talked about the way in which the guns could be made from bits of primitive farm equipment, essentially. And Neil liked that idea, but he kept saying, "Oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to use guns in the massacre, I'm really not sure." And then one day he just arrived with an image in his mind that he wanted to use flour blown from the actors' hands to create the puff of gun smoke. It was such a beautiful, expressive idea that made the guns unnecessary. For those that know the play, they'll know that there's a second telling of the massacre. The spirit of the river Dirrambin describes each of the Aboriginal family being killed one by one. And I suggested to Neil that we take up the image of the flower and that the Aboriginal characters release a handful of flour as they are being killed. And it was incredibly moving. The few of us that were in the rehearsal room that day were in tears. So we had a language of flour and paint and charcoal and other surfaces in the production.
There's a lot of untold stories about the many different clans around our country. Our spiritual sacred connections of symbolism in the landscape in this country are yet to be told. We are just scratching the surface of history. The morale of the black and white cast of Secret River, really them coming together as one, is what gives us the honest spirit of the play. They're telling a story that has been unresolved, and so in a way they take responsibility and caretaking for that story. The team, the creative team, directed by Neil, obviously Andrew Bovell, and look, the greatness of Kate and Andrew wanting to tell this true Australian story is a great moment in our dramatic arts landscape history.